Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube. We have kind of an interesting breaking news story. I was going to stream today anyway, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to kick off the stream with. We always start the stream with the subject and the title and thumbnail, and then it kind of diverges into whatever you guys bring up. I like the chat dictating what goes on. It's always fun. But right before I went live, Mark Gurman dropped a news story claiming that Apple is making a major turnaround, going against what they've said in the past, and is now actively developing MacBook Pros. He's claiming that the MacBook Pro will be the first Mac with a touch display. And no, we're not counting the touch bar. I was trying to get technical with everybody over on Twitter. But yeah, this is pretty new. Like, it's the first time we're hearing about this. But Bloomberg is somewhat of a reputable source. However, they are saying that this timeline is not that this product adding back the touchscreen is not supposed to happen until 2025. So clearly, we've got some time if this does end up being true. But I thought just the story being kicked off would be a good opportunity to discuss, well, it's 2023, and MacBooks, Airs, Pros, they still don't have touchscreens. iMacs don't have touchscreens. So let's go back a bit and just answer as to why MacBooks don't have touchscreens, right? Because back when Apple introduced the original iPhone, that was kind of what they were pioneering, was the multi-touch display, and you no longer need a physical keyboard, and just you can put everything on the screen. And then Steve was very excited about the iPad getting multi-touch on an even bigger display. Thank you for your support, Ethan. I'll address the chat more once I get through my little tangent here. But they were interested in bringing touch screens to bigger displays, but never the Mac. And the thumbnail of this stream that you guys probably saw, that was actually the moment Steve Jobs on stage addressed that they tried it. They usually don't say those kinds of things anymore, but they straight up said in an event, Steve did at least, that that it made great demo. Like, putting a touch display on a laptop always seems at first like a cool idea, but over time your hands get fatigued. It's not a practical way to interact with the laptop. And that it's just an ergonomic nightmare, essentially. So I applaud Apple for when they actually address why they don't do things or why they don't remove things. And, Steve is gone and there's different leadership now. So, you could make the same argument about how Steve didn't want a stylus and now Apple sells a stylus. But I think the context of that statement should be brought up more, because most people just tend to ignore it. Is like, he wasn't necessarily saying that all styli or styluses, whatever the plural is, are bad. At the time when they were unveiling the original iPhone, there were smartphones that you could only use with a stylus, and that was actually somewhat normal back then. It was like they didn't have touch displays, but they required a pen. You had to use the pen to do anything. And he was like, no, you gotta keep them somewhere, you gotta lose them. No, you got the best stylus right here with your hands. I don't think Steve had the exact same mentality of, okay, well, if it's a tablet and you're using it to draw, you should only use your fingers. I'm not sure that's what Steve was trying to say. He can't speak for himself, obviously, but in more recent history, Craig Federighi, just a couple years ago at DubDub, addressed, in kind of a very Steve Jobs-esque moment, came forward, and he was like, a lot of people are asking us, are we going to merge iPadOS with macOS? And he did that classic big old two-letter text comes down, it says no. And he goes, of course not. Like, we want operating systems to give in to their strengths and be focused on those strengths. But we don't see any need or advantages to merging macOS and iPadOS together, which, of course, just makes everyone ask lots of questions now when a major publication comes forward and says that touchscreens are coming to MacBooks. Now, if you're asking me personally, even though Gurman has a decent track record and he's pretty much like the most, I'm tempted to say the most consistently right, he still gets things wrong, but gets a lot of things right, especially as we get closer to reports. This is only, 2 years in advance, so a lot could change in 2 years. But I personally don't think Apple will do this, but I would love to hear someone's argument as to why they think Apple would change their mind or go back on what they said previously. And would this imply that it's a MacBook that folds all the way backwards so that you can turn it into a tablet? In which case, is it one device that can be iPadOS and macOS simultaneously, and switch between the two? That would kind of circumvent the whole argument of, no, we're not merging the two. You just have one device that can do both. Personally, I've talked about in the past how I would love an iMac Studio, and thank you, Bart Jansen, for the support for 16 months. Appreciate it. I thought if you were going to have a Mac with a touchscreen, it would actually make more sense to do it on a large desktop, so that you could swivel it downward like a Surface Studio and basically turn it into a giant iPad, and then you can fold it upright to put it back into macOS mode. It's just an iPad. Maybe how do we know this is a MacBook with a touchscreen and not an iPad with a keyboard stuck to it? What's the difference at that point? Skylar says, when Macs get touchscreens is like saying when pigs fly. Yeah, I get the feeling like it's been talked about for years and then it never happens. So that's why I'm hesitant to believe any type of report. So if we get closer and there's a lot of rumors all still pointing to it, I'll believe it. But I think Gurman's going to end up being wrong on this. That's my prediction. I think that maybe they spice up iPadOS after years of us asking. And maybe when iPadOS is more fully functional, they start adding more complicated hardware to the iPad, like giving it more ports, giving it bigger displays, that kind of thing. But this report is specifically saying that they're working on a MacBook that is OLED and also touchscreen. And I'm kind of like, how do we know MacBook from iPad at that point? You know, because we know iPads have touch layers. I guess the rumor is that they're testing it and the display is directly attached to a battery pack and keyboard, in which case is this just a very complicated iPad accessory that's a bit more intricate than just the basic Magic Keyboard design, more of like a Surface Book, if you will. We should bring back the iBook naming. That was very simple and easy. Joshua says touchscreens won't work with macOS. They already don't work practically with Windows, and it has been 10 years since touchscreen Windows machines became popular. Well, they're still doing it. I mean, obviously, I think the implication is that they would change macOS to make it more touch-friendly, or, again, they didn't necessarily go into much details on this report. There's a decent chance that it could be one of those, like, two-in-one products where you design a hinge that can fold all the way back. So instead of stopping at a certain point, you can just keep pushing the display lid until it closes on the other end, and then you have a keyboard and trackpad that you're holding on the back, and then when you're in tablet mode, it switches to iPadOS. That's hypothetically what this could do. Let's see. A touchscreen, but not the main screen. A touchscreen to replace the keyboard and trackpad. Oh, see, that's an interesting theory. I don't know. I used to think that there was a future for virtual keyboards, but now that Apple pushes physical keyboards with all their iPads so much, I've kind of given up the idea that Apple would make like just a non-touch display and a touch display on the laptop, and then you touch the virtual keyboard and use the virtual trackpad. Like, I don't mind virtual keyboards personally. I don't have a physical keyboard for my iPad anymore, and I don't mind just doing everything right off the touch display. But Apple got a lot of negative feedback surrounding the butterfly keyboard because people didn't like the way the keys felt. And I think that would be even worse if you just had to tap a solid surface. Maybe the thought process is you have to have a haptic feedback the size of the entire keyboard so that it feels like you're clicking keys, but it's not really a click. And again, there would be no travel. So there's all kinds of prototyping, I'm sure, going on. But I think it's personally saying it's coming in 2025 is way too soon. I think that's it means it's in the early beta prototype phase, which means that it could very easily be scrapped, even if it is being worked on. iMac touchscreen makes more sense. I would be interested to see them try to do that. What do you think of an iMac with pencil supports? Yeah, it would be great, as long as there's a way to swivel it down. Basically, just straight up copy the Microsoft Surface Studio, is what I'm saying. Like, just look at the Surface Studio. Instead of having a crappy, laptop chip in that little base station, put in Mac Studio specs. Put in an M1 Pro, M1 Max equivalent chip, and then have this giant, beautiful iPad that's basically 30 inches, and you can slap your Apple Pencil on the side of it, and you can swivel it down, and you can use it as a super powerful iMac, but then you can bring it down and use it as a giant iPad. That sounds really cool to me. I would love it if they did something like that, and I applaud Microsoft for coming up with such a crazy design. J Money, thank you for your support. He says a two-handed touchscreen makes more sense on iPad. I think so too. Personally, I just don't think there's that many people with MacBooks that are wishing that they could reach out and touch the display because macOS is just optimized in such a way. But I mean, the hypothetical that I'm trying to open my mind to is like, well, maybe it's for whatever reason. I don't think this is the case, but like for the sake of the argument, let's say that Apple says that if we try to do dual boot macOS on the iPad, or if we try to make the iPad more and more functional and gain more and more Mac features, it's just going to kill the battery, and the hardware's too thin, and it's going to be too thermal constrained, so we can't do it. I don't think that's true, but humor me for a second. Let's just say to make the iPad more functional, it needs to be way bigger, and it needs bigger batteries. So Apple's like, okay, well, we would like to make our devices more and more of like 2-in-1 friendly, because we hear a lot of people saying like, I want my iPad to be more Mac-like. And maybe Apple's thinking it might be easier to make the MacBook more iPad-like than it is to make an iPad more Mac-like. And there is some argument to that, like, for example, the MacBook Pro, because it's so much heavier and so much larger, it can fit bigger battery packs, it can fit an active cooling system, and if you just tweak the hinge design a little bit, you can just copy whatever popular 2-in-1 360-degree laptops are out there now. Apple's not against copying people. They basically straight up copied the Surface Pro keyboard and stand design for the iPad 10. They had their own exclusive keyboard design, and then they were like, yeah, let's just use Microsoft's. That way we can have the function keys and volume. So if they designed their own MacBook that was 360 degree that you could swing all the way back, and it's a touchscreen, then that would probably be easier. Well, I don't know if I could say easier, but they could at least get away with charging more for that MacBook than what you would be charging an iPad for. If Apple is worried about cannibalizing iPad sales, then I guess if your 2-in-1s are all more expensive than MacBooks, which I feel like the iPad already is, so I don't know. See, I'm having a hard time convincing myself. I don't even believe the hypothetical argument I'm pushing here. But I could see some crappy like argument that tries to make the case that like we can build in iPad tech to a MacBook, but we can't build in Mac tech to an iPad. I don't agree with that argument, but I could see Apple trying to make that case. I guess is what I'm trying to say. I bought a 14 Pro. I don't think dropping my 11 Pro is a good idea. No, probably not, Chris. Let's see. As an iPad Pro enjoyer, the thumbnail of the stream concerns me. Apple should be doing it the other way around. Yeah. I'm right there with you. I think always just adding more software is going to be cheaper than developing brand new hardware, especially because there's a lot of people out there that definitely don't want MacBooks to become 2-in-1s. They like the fact that they're just a keyboard and a trackpad, and that macOS isn't trying to be something it's not. I know a lot of people that prefer MacBooks for that very reason, and it's like the touchscreen is a little bit of a nice to have on occasion. Like once in a while you reach up and hit X or hit Enter. But I agreed with Steve Jobs' original claim, and what Apple has said in the past with Craig Federighi in charge in more recent history is like, that's such a occasional rare thing that really dirties up the display anyway, that I'm okay with it not being there. It would drive the price of the MacBook up. It would make the display lid a lot thicker, which would make the device heavier. You have to beef up the hinge a lot more if you're trying to make it touch friendly. So I'm not in favor of it, if you're asking me. I think the solution, if Apple wants to go the 2-in-1 approach, is to make iPads more Mac-friendly, because personally, I do believe that they have the hardware necessary. Even if the battery life's a bit worse, okay, then that can just be the compromise of the 2-in-1. We can work on improving the hardware down the road once we have the original design down. But iPads, in my view, have everything they need to run macOS, or to at least do everything a Mac can. They just do it a little bit worse. But Apple is very comfortable making worse versions of things. That's pretty much the entire iPad lineup right now is just worse versions of the 2018 iPad Pro. It's like, here's a slightly worse version for $600. Here's a really worse version for $450. You know, they just take worse designs and they're like, well, if you want a better version of that, you got to pay big bucks for it. But and also Apple's not afraid from letting cheaper options having features over higher end options. You know, like the iPad 10 gets to boast about that landscape camera and having the function row key on the keyboard, but the iPad Pro can't have those things. So it's not like, well, if Apple can't make one device that can do it all, then they just won't do it. It's like, well, they're already doing that. So let's see. What if Apple is just testing macOS on a touchscreen before they design an iPad with macOS? Maybe, I don't know. Can't see Apple making a touchscreen Mac. I have a hard time believing it. Yeah, to me, just the software team probably has a way. Apple has their backdoor ways of booting up custom software on different devices. I think it would be very easy to just boot macOS on an iPad. That doesn't sound very complicated. I read the title. Say what? Yeah, Gurman saying that by 2025 Apple's going to have a touchscreen MacBook, and I'm basically talking about why I have a hard time believing it. But I guess I was curious if anyone in the chat thinks that this is a good idea. I'm not seeing that many people argue as to why this would be good. Yeah, Gas here is saying touchscreen MacBook wouldn't work. There has to be another solution. It will need thinking out of the box. I think it goes without saying if they did do this, it would require a lot of tinkering on the OS level. Will I be getting the mixed reality VR headset? I mean, personally, I don't think it's a thing. I don't think it's going to come out, but if it does and I'm wrong, then I'll probably at least try it, but I have no interest in actually like keeping it. Like I can't think of anything I would need a mixed reality headset for, especially a $3,000 one. It's essential to be able to feel your way around the keyboard without looking for power users. Oh, Cadenza is saying that's the argument against the virtual keyboard. I don't completely understand that because I don't feel like there's usually that many people reaching for the keyboard just purely feeling for things. Like, oh yes, shift key. Oh yes, that's M. Like, it's not directly you looking at it, but it is kind of in your peripherals that you can kind of see where your fingers are. That's why our keyboards have letters on them. There's some keyboards that don't have letters on them, but it gives people anxiety when they use them. They're like, wait a second. But I still agree that it's the feel of it is important enough that I don't think Apple would ditch the physical keyboard just in favor of virtual only. Simply make touch an option like glossy matte hires. Why not? Okay, Tommy P might be the first person in the chat I've seen that's saying it's okay. For one, because it drives the price up, probably complicates manufacturing. I mean, already they don't do glossy versus matte options on the MacBook Pro. I think they offer glossy versus matte on their monitors, but not their laptops. And I feel like Tim Cook is kind of a mastermind of supply chains and simplifying manufacturing, which has allowed them to scale to new heights that were never achieved under Steve Jobs. The virtual keyboard is there when you need it, but doesn't take up space when you don't. That's what I like about virtual keyboards. But I think a dual screen iPad makes sense, which could explain why Gurman thinks it's a laptop. Dual screen iPad. What would be the point of that? I'm not against it. I'm just trying to visualize. It's just two iPads stitched together, basically. And, like, the bottom screen can become a keyboard, or I don't know. He's not saying it's a foldable, so I don't think that's what it is. Do I think the 14-inch MacBook Pro is the best value MacBook at any price range? I mean, it's hard to say any price range because it's like, well, it depends on the market. I don't think that, like, I don't know if you can say there's a best value MacBook factoring in $8,000 MacBooks. Like, what you really get, it just depends on what's important to you. To me, best value tends to lean more towards price. It doesn't necessarily mean cheapest, but like that's what my last video was about, was like factoring in price. I think the M1 MacBook Air is just like an insanely good deal. 14-inch MacBook Pro is also a very good deal, but it's unlocking a bunch of things that everyday people probably don't care that much about. So I don't know if I would say it's the best value MacBook, period. I would say for like the vast majority of people, the MacBook Air is probably plenty and then some because of how fast the M1 chip is. 14-inch MacBook Pro is just like fun overkill. Like, for professionals, it's great, but I don't know if I would paint best value on it. It is a good deal, but I can't really say of all price ranges. No, I don't think so. Um, let's see. Yeah, Surface Neo. That never came out, did it? Who would want a virtual keyboard with zero travel? I'm on the record for saying I wouldn't mind it because I grew up with virtual keyboards and I've just never been I need the physical keys. I need that travel. I've never cared about that kind of thing. I wrote like movie scripts and essays completely on touch displays. Growing up, until the Magic Keyboard came out, I never bought keyboards for my iPads. I never bought those Smart Folio things. I never bought any of that. The only reason I bought the Magic Keyboard case for my iPad, which I don't have anymore, so I wasn't even really super sold on it, but only reason I bought that was because it added the trackpad, and I was expecting that to unlock a lot more use cases in the future, and also I really wanted the additional USB-C port, and I liked the floating design. But then when iPadOS didn't go anywhere, I was like, yeah, no, never mind. I don't really need a Magic Keyboard case anymore. So I'm back to just using my iPad without the keyboard case. You have a MBA in MBA. Oh, I get it. Adam saying it did sound like you have an MBA in MBAs. Yeah, we got to be careful with our MacBook Air acronyms, right? Let's see. Image quality is awesome. Are you recording with a Pixel phone? Well, yes, I am. No. Continuity camera. iPhone 13 Pro Max camera is pretty insanely good. The reason they don't want macOS on iPads is because iPads have limited storage like 3264. Well, you can restrict it to the higher storage tiers. That's not the problem. The same way they restrict Stage Manager and external monitor support to the M1 level chips, you can restrict macOS to the iPads that only have 256 gigs of storage. And I think even macOS still runs on MacBooks or it used to, maybe not Ventura, but previous versions of macOS ran on MacBooks with 128 gigs of storage, which all the M1 iPads, no, except the Air, has 128 gigs of storage. But we've established Apple is not beyond software locking things, right? They have decided that the Apple Pencil hover feature will only work with the M2 chip. I don't believe that. I think that's total baloney. Because there is a hover accessibility feature that I've used on my 2018 iPad Pro where it clearly is able to detect where the pencil is before it's touched the display. It's capable of registering that. They just claim that you need the M2 chip to do that. And I'm like, no, it's like I never suggested that Apple should put macOS on iPads with 32 gigs of storage. I never said that. I've always been like, iPadOS is fine for iPads that are $600 or less. And I'm including the secondhand market, like 2018 iPad Pros. You can find those for $500, sometimes less. And those iPadOS is fine. But if you're going to sell M1 iPads or M2 iPads with 2 terabytes of storage and 16 gigs of RAM, those should have a dual boot macOS option to fully unlock the capability because iPadOS is just super limiting in its capability. You can't upgrade the SSD. That's correct. Virtual keyboard with haptics would work, kind of like iOS 16 keyboard, but much more realistic feeling. I still don't think they would because a lot of people complained about the butterfly keyboards, and it wasn't just because of the sound or the reliability. There were a lot of people that just didn't like the way they felt. And Apple seems to be pushing for physical keyboards on all of their iPads now, except the Mini. So I think that Apple's just kind of caved and admitted that physical keyboards are a good thing. Virtual keyboards are handy, but physical keyboards are going to be around, and I don't think they have an intention to eventually get rid of them, personally. Let's see. My boyfriend thinks touchscreen Macs should have been a thing for 20 years. Well, you can ask how well Surface has done with it. I mean, they haven't had zero sales, but I don't think they've necessarily outsold MacBooks. Apple Pencil Hover will probably be announced as a software feature at DubDub for other iPads, but they just wanted a few extra sales on the new iPad Pros. They've done stuff like that in the past where they software restrict a feature to new hardware and then down the road they add it for everybody else. I remember them doing that with a lot of camera quick take settings for the iPhone 11 series, I think. Like on the iPhone 11 Pro, you could change the frame rate and the resolution from the camera app, but you couldn't do it on the 10 and 10s. And everyone was like, what? And they were like, no, you need a pro iPhone to have those features. Thank you for the super chat, though, Puroski. Didn't say anything, but thank you for the donation. And then at the next dub, they added it for everybody else in iOS. It was like, cool, a new feature. Let's see. I have an iPad Pro 2018. If I keep Apple Care for like 3 more years, do you think they will eventually give me the newest iPad model when I make a claim? Probably not. I don't think that's how it works, but good luck. iPadOS is limited for M iPad, and people keep... Wait, limited for M iPad, and some people keep denying it. Oh, yes, I agree with you, AJ. My roommate has a 2-in-1 Chromebook, and he almost never uses the touchscreen. It's only useful for Android apps from the Play Store. That's what I've noticed from the people I know that have Microsoft or Surface laptops, or pretty much any laptop that has a touch display, is that they very rarely use it. And I noticed that about Surface Pros, too, for the people I've seen with Surface Pros, is like they're pretty much always using the keyboard and trackpad, and they'll only use the touch display if they're like drawing or taking notes, which isn't bad. I'm just saying MacBooks aren't really used in that way currently, and I'm not sure if redesigning them from the ground up so that everybody can take notes on them, I don't know, doesn't that kind of kill iPad's market in a way? Like if you start making MacBooks that can replace iPads, that's going to be the next big headline across the website. The laptop that can replace your tablet. Oh, great. Let's see. But please tell me if I'm wrong. Surface Pros are trash. I remember when he told us years ago that virtual keyboard laptops are coming, and at CES there were a bunch. He was right. Well, the virtual keyboard laptops aren't really... I mean, they exist, but I don't know if I would say they've gone mainstream. I have the iPad Mini 6, and I can hover right with the Apple Pencil. Yeah, it's not... From what I can tell, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any teardowns confirming this. I don't believe in the M2 iPad Pro teardown there was proof that they added some... Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I would have thought that they would have made articles about this if it were true. But as far as I can tell, M2 iPad Pro is basically identical to the M1 iPad Pro. They just put in an an M2 chip instead of an M1. And I think they wrote iPad Pro on the back instead of iPad. It's just the inscription is a little bit different. I don't think they added another digitizer. It's not like there's something inherently in that hardware that the Apple Pencil can now send it, because obviously you didn't need a new pencil, right? You could keep using the old Apple Pencil. Piroski says, I feel like a touchscreen Mac would only be useful as a demo feature, and that's about it. Not many people would actively use it after months of ownership. That's what Steve discovered all those years ago. That's what they said on stage, and that's still the case. Here we are all these years later, and Apple's still not shipping touchscreens. So my question to this whole report is like, what changed? Like, okay, you're claiming that you have sources telling you this. What inspired Apple to go the other way? They just decided, we want MacBooks to sell at even better volume. And they're already selling really well, especially since they switched to Apple Silicon. It's taken off. And do they think they can secure more market share if they have touchscreens because their competitors have touchscreens? Is that the logic? I mean, I don't see it personally. Adding touch and pencil support to a Mac would be admitting the iPad Pro software for artists is weak sauce compared to the Mac versions. Oh, I think they kind of already admitted that based on how they've treated iPadOS. They're like, you can pretend to be a Mac, but not really a Mac. Indirectly, I think they've already admitted that, but I do think that it would start killing off iPad sales, like, especially for the higher end market. Like, okay, there are some people that definitely buy iPads and don't buy MacBooks because MacBooks are just too expensive and a little bit more than they need. They just need something for, occasional note-taking and drawing or media consumption, and the iPad is cheaper than a MacBook, so they buy the iPad, done. They don't buy the MacBook. But once you start getting into the iPad Pro levels of pricing, like $1,000, $1,100, those types of people tend to have Macs around. If you're comfortable dropping over $1,000 on a large device, and you're probably getting it with a keyboard and stuff. So to me, it would start eating into high end iPad sales quite a bit if you were able to do everything that an iPad Pro could do on your laptop, which you can't right now because MacBooks are missing some of that hardware, like Apple Pencil support, like a touch display or Face ID. I assume that if they baked a touch panel into a MacBook, it would probably have to get a bit thicker, and if it was thicker, then maybe it could accommodate for Face ID. But um, we're talking about touchscreen MacBooks. Can we, and there's all these people saying no, I don't want that. Can we at least get cellular on our MacBooks first? Like, why the heck is that still not a thing? Like, I don't even know why people want to do cellular on their iPads, but I could see cellular on MacBooks. Like, we're bringing 5G, 5G, 5G. I'm positive Gurman's rumors aren't for MacBooks, and it's actually the rumored foldable iPad with dual stack OLEDs. I don't like, by foldable, do you just mean it has a hinge, or do you mean the display actually folds? Because I feel like that report would be very different. Foldable iPad Pro with virtual keyboard makes more sense. It doesn't really make much sense to me because Apple doesn't really support virtual keyboards that heavily with iPad. Like every iPad other than the mini on the website, they advertise along with a physical keyboard. Encouraging use of a virtual keyboard would weaken sales. If you tried to build in a big virtual keyboard, that for one, that would drive the price way up, and I don't think the iPad Pros are selling very well in the first place. So if you sold one that folds in half for $1,500, $2,000, that's good. Yeah, especially if the display actually folds, that's going to be way more expensive. And Apple's already kind of admitted that most people like having a physical keyboard. That's why they're constantly trying to upsell you at every checkout page for every iPad model. They're like, "Do you want to get the keyboard too? It's only $150. It's only $200." This MacBook has 5G, 5G, 5G. iPads will pivot to become Xbox devices, so no problem. What? What do you mean Xbox devices? Apple should just integrate the iPad Pro into the Mac family at this point. Well, I mean, maybe that's more digestible for some reason to Apple. Be like, well, it'd be easier to convince people. Like, if we try to build macOS into an iPad, we're going to have to charge $1,500 for it or something. And it'd be easier, rather than restricting macOS to higher end versions of the iPad, it would be easier for us to just offer, I don't know what you call it, MacBook Pad. The hybrid device, the two-in-one. It would be easier for us to just sell a $3,000 MacBook that has iPad features than it would be to sell a $1,500 iPad that has MacBook features. Maybe that, I don't agree with that argument, but maybe that's the argument they're thinking. I don't know. A virtual keyboard as a plan B would be fine, just like iPad. I just don't see them pitching like, they redesigned the entire iPad specifically for a virtual keyboard when we know that most people probably aren't going to use the virtual keyboard as much as a physical. If the hardware is the reason why the Pencil Hover is only compatible with M2 iPad Pro, why wouldn't Apple put that panel earlier on the 2018 iPad Pro to activate the Apple Pencil Hover feature? Well, I've seen people that, without much evidence, make the case that they're like, okay, you can technically do some form of hover, clearly, because I've tested it on my own iPad Pro. I thought I showed it in one of my videos. If you go back on my rant videos about the M2 iPad Pro, there's an accessibility feature where you can turn it on, and when you hover the Apple Pencil over certain text on my 2018 iPad Pro, I'm not touching the display, but it will highlight the text and expand it so that it's easier to read or something for people with vision problems, I guess. So there's clearly a way, but someone was making the case that they added a new digitizer layer to the M2 iPad Pro that allows it to be more accurate and work from further away. But I never saw teardowns that proved that. I've only seen comments that claimed that. Please tag me on Twitter if I'm wrong on that, because I will happily admit if I'm wrong. But even so, I would still make the argument that, okay, well, there can be a somewhat limited version of Apple Pencil Hover. Maybe it doesn't perform as great as the M2 iPad Pro's version of the Hover does, if that's true. But again, I have not seen any evidence that there is any difference in the displays, in the panels, in the digitizer layer. Main reason being that Apple, when they first unveiled the Apple Pencil, was happy to talk about how the Apple Pencil gives off like different frequencies depending on the angle, and those frequencies are obviously measurable before they reach the display because it has super low latency. It has to be able to pick that up. Has iFixit done a teardown of the M2 iPad Pro to prove that yet? I have not seen it. No, I from what I could tell, there's no difference in the display, but I don't know if a teardown spotted something. I just figured if there was a difference in the display layer, that would have come up in the news. Like, that's if that would have been the most interesting hardware design change if there was one. You know, like that. And other than that, there was basically no hardware differences. Other than the M2 chip, of course, which is arguably just an overclocked M1 chip. So I was like, if anything like that affected the entire display came up, I feel like there would have been news articles about that. Like teardown shows how Apple Pencil hover feature is activated, and that those news articles never came up. So I assume there's no difference. Could go with a dual display like the Lenovo Yoga with two displays without the fold. Well, that's what... If Apple was to bring touchscreens to Macs, that's how I would assume they would do it. I have a hard time believing that it would just be an occasional, yep, I can reach out and tap once in a while when there's a big highlighted button. I just hit OK every once in a while. Like, I don't see Apple doing that. It's like if you were going to bring touch, you would need to redesign the OS a lot or definitely redesign the hardware a lot because the hardware is currently not capable of doing touch. And I don't just mean that there's not a touch layer. I also mean that like the display lid, if you just like, if anybody's watching this or nearby has a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, any MacBook from the past couple of years, if you just like tap off to the side of your display, look at how much it wobbles. Like the current displays are not, the hinge is not optimized for someone to be reaching out and tapping it because it would be crazy. Your finger would be tapping all the time and back and forth. And it's definitely not touch friendly, even if they could fit a touch layer in there. So it would have to get thicker. They would have to beef up the hinge, which would make the MacBook heavier and it would make it cost more. I don't think they would go through all of that just for once in a while, I might just hit tap. I might go to Control Center, hit Wi-Fi instead of using the trackpad. It's like, no, they'd want to showcase some new feature, which in my view, what can iPads do that Macs can't? Apple Pencil touch support with note-taking, more gaming experiences, I guess. If, they were comfortable bringing iPadOS apps to Mac. They're okay with you running iPad apps on the Mac. So if the Mac had a touch screen, maybe it would be better at gaming. But by gaming, I mean iPad tablet gaming, not like desktop class gaming. But those are supposed to become one and the same thing, right? Remember everyone telling me that Apple Silicon was going to make Macs the best at gaming. Where did that go? Yeah, and a ton of people are bringing up, of course, that makes the screen way dirtier. But I mean, like, there's tons of laptops that have touchscreen displays. You got to clean them a bit more regularly. iPads have dirty displays too. It's like Wobblebook Pro. Wouldn't macOS on an iPad drain the battery quicker? Sure, but so does using LiDAR. So does using AR experiences. So does 5G. 5G makes the battery drain quicker. There's tons of things you can add. So does the M2 chip. There's tons of things you can add to the iPad that give it more functionality but hurt the battery life. And even so, if you're that concerned about it, I wouldn't be against like, okay, well, Apple, you're literally showcasing in your events and on your website people using the iPad Pro with a Thunderbolt port. They're putting on a fully fledged Thunderbolt port on these things that can do data and power at the same time. And you're advertising us using Stage Manager with an external monitor. It's like, okay, in that specific use case, the iPad has power. It can pull all of its power through that Thunderbolt port. It doesn't need to tap into the battery. Assuming it had optimized battery charging, it wouldn't need to touch the battery at all, and it could just keep the battery at 80%. I think that would even be progress. That would even be a step up from what we have now. It's like, okay, iPads can run macOS, but only when plugged into an external monitor. It's not ideal. It's not what we all want, but it would be a step in the right direction of like, okay, you can have one device with an M2 chip and 2 terabytes of storage, 16 gigs of RAM, and you can use it on the go. There's note-taking and you're drawing and whatever you want to do with a normal iPad. But then when you're ready to start doing more desktop class stuff like Final Cut, Logic, or Xcode, or Terminal, or access the more like fully fledged desktop version of applications, then you plug it into an external monitor. It gives you the option to run macOS. That would be better than what we have now. It's like, it would be a small use case, but it would definitely be bigger than what we currently have. Like the number of people that are buying terabyte iPad Pros with what iPadOS is capable of handling is so insanely small, that I'm just like, anything, come on, just throw any kind of bone to that market of charging that much for a device. Um, yeah, it would be kind of cool, just like, all right, only when docked. But personally, it's like Apple didn't care about the battery life of MacBooks being that weak a couple years ago. Like those Intel MacBooks, you open any Adobe application on those things, the battery life is gone in about an hour. So now you're worried about the battery life on the iPad not being 10 hours because it's running macOS? Is like, come on, come on. Touchscreen Mac would be useful for notes, Photoshop, etc., but it needs Apple Pencil support for trackpads when docked. It is a niche use case. I would like it and use it, but not pay extra for it. That's the problem. It's going to cost extra. There's no way they could add touchscreens without increasing the price, in my opinion. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. They said, imagine if there was a keyboard with physical scissor switches and everything, keys that actually have travel, but each key has its own display, good for language switching, showing shortcuts, and more. I think they have patents on that. Yeah, I think I've seen pitches for it. I mean, I could see it being occasionally helpful, but also very expensive. Trying to put, like, think of how many keys there are in a keyboard, each one having its own separate display. Ugh, like, that's got to be complicated to manufacture. I'm sure in prototyping, like, stages, they've done something like that where it's like, okay, in different applications you can switch the keys around to be different things. So here's my Final Cut keyboard layout. Here's my iMessage keyboard layout. So you'd still get the physical travel. You'd still get the regular scissor switches, but I just think that would probably instantly cost easily 10 times what it costs to do a regular keyboard. These basic keys they put in these things are very cheap. They're just little plastic pieces. They're very easy to service and replace. You want the MacBook keyboard to look like a loop deck. I don't know what a loop deck is, but it sounds like a stream deck, which I've used in the past, where you just have a bunch of customizable buttons with screens on each one that you can map. But that's like a pretty small number of buttons, and that costs several $100s. I'm sure that it's way more expensive than the MacBook keyboard. Let's see. It's hard. There's 180 people watching. I can't answer everybody at the same time. What do you think if Apple made a MacBook SE as an entry level? They already did. It's called the M1 MacBook Air. It's just not called the MacBook SE because the sales would be worse if it was named that. You want a somewhat newer chip and an older design. That's what the M1 MacBook Air is. It's a newer chip from a design from 2018, and they fixed the keyboard. Just talked about that in my last video. It's like you can find those things for $700. I don't think Apple's going to sell a MacBook for lower than $700. And the M1 chip is plenty fast, but the design is a little bit dated. That's the epitome of a SE product. Old design, newer chip. They sell the M1 Air now. That's your MacBook SE. MacBook Classic. Yeah, it's like you can come up with whatever name fits that product better, but like the reason they call it that is because they get better sales because the name is iconic and recognizable. People don't. I don't know why they did iPhone SE or why they kept that around as long as they did, but I don't think what works for the iPhone will work for the MacBook. Stylus was for the interface, nothing to do with iPad. Correct. That's when Steve made that claim. My hope is Apple developed a touchscreen Mac that realizes they need to resisting macOS to be touch-friendly, then realizes that this touch-friendly macOS should just become iPadOS and cancel the Mac. Cancel the Mac? That's insane. How is Apple not able to put the scissor switches in the 2016 MacBooks? They could have. They just thought that the butterfly keyboard was going to be a better solution. They thought that was going to help with stability and they could make the design thinner than a regular keyboard. And then they realized that it was super unreliable and they tried to fix it several generations and they kept failing and kept failing. And a lot of people complained about them and said, please just go back to the old Magic Keyboard approach. And they did. And the sales were good. So I think that it was just an attempt at trying to figure out what the future was, and they were wrong on that one. Karen, thank you for the super chat. I still think Gurman is wrong. Apple has done testing, and they've always stated that touchscreen laptops cause hand fatigue. They're never going to do it. Yeah, I mean, I don't believe Gurman yet because it's too early. Like, he's saying this isn't going to happen until 2025. And I'm like, are we going to remember that your report from January 11th when we're midway through 2025? What's that? When we're about to watch Worldwide Developer Conference 25, are we going to be thinking about what was announced on January 11th in 2023? Probably not. That's why I instantly, no matter how reliable the source is, I doubt most rumors that are that far out because so many things change and Apple rarely sticks to plans for that long. So thank you for the super chat, by the way. That was kind of you. But I don't think that I'm trying to entertain the idea because I don't think Gurman is necessarily making stuff up for the sake of attention. He could be. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but hypothetically, if I'm entertaining the idea, if Apple were to add touchscreens to MacBooks, I don't think they would do it in the way that Steve or Craig were picturing, where you just have a MacBook and it's open and the keyboard and trackpad is sitting there, and now you just occasionally reach up and tap the display. I think if they were to do it, they would do it the Lenovo way, where, okay, it's just keyboard and mouse only when you have it open like this, but then when you swing the display all the way to the back, you can turn it into tablet mode, or perhaps even go the Surface Book route and have a way to physically detach the display from the rest of the MacBook. The only issue with that is you lose out on your battery and your graphics card when you detach it. So you lose a lot of performance, but you do have a tablet that you can interact with the stylus and treat it like an iPad. Think of it that way. There's an idea. What if Apple was recreating something like the Surface Book, and you could bake as much performance as you can into this type of form factor, right? So we know that with a fairly thin chassis, like this is 5.9 millimeters, they've since gotten thicker because everyone complained about it, bending and all that. Mine never bent, by the way. But if you can bake an M2 chip into this, but then the keyboard and battery portion, the bottom piece of a MacBook, that could accommodate for an M1 Pro, M1 Max type chip, or M2 Pro, whatever chip this is 2025, so this could be M3, M4 by then. Those chips could work in tandem when you're docked, so you can offload some performance onto one chip, offload different performance to the iPad chip, but then when you disconnect, it's only iPadOS, but now you just have a M2, M3, entry-level M chip powering your note-taking and your drawing when you're on the go. But then when you want that extra performance, you dock it, and now you have the Mac battery size, you have active cooling for that M2 Pro or M2 Max chip, and you basically are just literally taking a MacBook and an iPad and stuffing them together. That's like one way they could go about it. I'm entertaining it because I would like to, in these streams, and of course on my channel, I enjoy speculation, even entertaining the idea of things that I don't think will happen. I kind of like get tired sometimes of Apple just always playing it safe, and I think that Apple under Tim has done very, very well by just doing it the safe way a lot of the time. Like, that they have the route of what is just going to make the most amount of people happy, or like they cave a lot with iOS updates now. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes I'd say that's bad. But it's like everybody complained about this, so we went back on what we said, and we are just going to give everybody what they want. But I don't feel like Apple takes as many risks, and risks can result in bad products. Maybe iPad 10 was a risk. Maybe I shouldn't say they don't take risks anymore. But like, it'd be cool to see Apple try to do more things that are pretty like out there, are pretty like weird, just to see if it works. But they tend to not do that much stuff anymore. Touch Bar and Butterfly keyboard was not playing it safe. No, the 2021 MacBook Pros were playing it safe, which I appreciate. I'm not trying to say that playing it safe is bad. There's some circumstances in life where you really want to play it safe, like surgery and air travel. Two things where you don't want to, let's see what happens if we do it a little more risky. It's like, no, there's benefits, of course. Apple made a great product when they played it safe. But I also think that you don't unlock or discover new markets or new experiences when you play it safe all the time. And you can't really know what you're not like if Tim Cook was CEO of Apple in early 2000s and Steve never came back and he just formed Next and just never was at Apple again, would the iPhone have happened? That's an interesting question. Like would Tim have expanded Apple in that way or as quickly? Maybe he would have, but it would have taken longer. Have I ever seen a Karen in near an Apple store? No, I haven't, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate the donation, but it's kind of off topic, so I'm sorry if I didn't prioritize it. The crap book should also have the butterfly keyboard and USB-A only. Ew, no. I don't care how expensive or how cheap the device is. USB-A needs to die. It was the worst port design in human history. And somehow we mass-produced it and put it on everything. A port design that is symmetrical but not reversible is the biggest facepalm in the hardware world. What do you think the OS would be like? I don't touch MacBook. I assume they would either have to heavily tweak macOS to make it more touch friendly, or it would be a dual boot. It would be a device that can run macOS and iPadOS, which I don't think is that crazy considering Apple's made a lot of devices that can run macOS and Windows. It's like you're okay with your devices natively booting into third-party operating systems. So why is it such a stretch to assume that it can run two different first-party operating systems? USB-A sucks. Don't fight me on that. Gurman says, well, he shouldn't have said. That's why I didn't say touchscreen MacBooks are coming. That would have been clickbait. But no, I'm stating a fact. The title of this stream is a fact. This is what Gurman said. The content in the stream is, here's how that could work, here's what they might do, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't believe Gurman at this point. Since Apple always plays it safe, I got a Tesla to experience the cutting-edge tech and risky ideas. Oh, there you go. I don't know. Teslas are... Yeah, I would say they're pretty risky in a lot of... As far as car design goes, I would argue Aptera is a little more risky. Like, I love my Tesla, but I'm also just super pumped and excited for Aptera because they take it a step further. It's like, basically both Tesla and Aptera are two different car companies or automotive companies that are trying to figure out what they can get away with removing. Like Tesla's like, you don't need a speedometer, you don't need a key fob, you don't need a start button, you don't need all that, you don't need a gas engine, right? You don't need gas stations. You can do all of this on one display. You can do all this on your phone. You can do all of this with one battery pack. You don't need a gas generator backup. Aptera's like, you don't need a second row, you don't need a fourth wheel, you don't need all these things. And I like when companies challenge themselves because I think it's really easy to just try to merge a bunch of products together. You just like, okay, let's just think of all of the technology we can. Touchscreens, let's throw it in the MacBook. Apple Pencil, let's throw it in the MacBook. It's easy to just stockpile a bunch of stuff, put it into one product, and just have the most amount of features listed possible. Arguably, that's kind of what Android is as a platform, and Samsung skins especially. Like, how many features and like settings can we bake in? I think was it Marquez who said like Samsung phones have like a million different customization settings and stuff. You can always bake more stuff, but what always is more impressive to me is like how many things can we remove? Like, how many things do we not need? How many steps and processes can we get rid of? And like, how simple can we make it? How streamlined can we make this experience? The biggest one Aptera is going for is you don't need to plug in your car. It's like, if you design your vehicle like this with solar cells on it, it'll charge itself. You don't need to plug it into the wall anymore, which is like, okay, it's kind of blowing my mind right now. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. He says, I didn't know people had that issue with USB-A. There's a USB logo on all cables, and I always make sure to keep it up. On USB-C, I also keep logo up. You shouldn't have to look at the logo. Like, I understand. I'm a techie person, so I know how to look at a USB-A port and know, okay, this is the right way to plug it in. But you don't know which way the port is oriented in the computer, depending on which computer you're going up to. And even if I know that, not everybody does, which makes it not intuitive. It's like, you can know how to write software for applications, and you could argue, well, yeah, I know how to do that, but that doesn't mean everybody does. And if it's something as streamlined and as universal as a cable and a port that we're going to use our flash drives on, how many freaking man hours have we wasted our lives trying to plug in the flash drive? Oh, wrong way. Let me plug it in this way. Oh, wrong way. Let me plug it in this way. happening all the time. It still does. And people plug it in wrong and they have to look at, whoa, wait, is it this way? Is it this way? It's like, you shouldn't have to look. It should just be like either Lightning or Type-C, where you just plug it in. Done. Call it a day. Malak says, is Tailosive Tech Ultra a good deal? Might get it. No, it's a terrible deal. Don't buy it. iPhone SE is so not risky, it's almost risky. The price is risky. There's not really anything wrong with the iPhone SE3, in my opinion, except for the price. Same opinion about the 14 Plus. iPhone 14 Plus is a great phone. It's just poorly priced, which makes it not worth it. You should not buy it. Let's see. I'd argue that micro USB port is worse than USB-A. At least that micro USB is not symmetrical. So you can pretty much only plug it in one way. Or at least it appears you can only plug it in one way because you can. USB-A has the appearance of being plugged in two different ways, but it can't. Which is why it's wasted so much of our lives. Hey Drew, is it true touchscreen MacBooks are coming? I know you don't like them with what you said. I'm not like... I've said so many things over the years, I can't remember what my last opinion on them was because we haven't talked about them in a while. I'm not like fundamentally against it. I just don't want it. As someone who uses a MacBook very frequently for my job, I have not run into any situation where I'm like, boy, I wish I could just reach up and touch my MacBook right now. So I don't think they're going to. Mark Gurman, who is a much more reliable leaker than I am. He's gotten a lot of things wrong, but he's also gotten a lot of things right, so I'm trying to give him credit where credit is due, especially leading up to events. When we get really, really close to launches, he tends to be very accurate. But he's talking about 2025, which is why I don't believe him. It's like, okay, you might have a source that's telling you Apple's working on a touchscreen MacBook. That doesn't mean Apple's going to release it by 2025. I don't know if his source is telling him that. That would be a different situation. But there's so many things that could change internally at Apple. We're at the just barely starting 2023. MacBook with touchscreen wouldn't be released until the soonest March 2025, which is over 2 years from now. So many things can change. Yeah, neglecting the iPad software is risky. There's risk. I guess what I'm trying to say by risky is not like not doing things. I'm not trying to say risky in the sense of like price something poorly, or risky in the sense of not update something for a long time like iPadOS or Mac Pro. I'm saying risky in the sense of introducing a new product that caters to a very different market. I guess maybe I should eat my words. The mixed reality headset sounds very risky to me. Releasing a $3,000 headset with battery packs that attach to your waist so that you can, I don't know, do some kind of 3D modeling from your living room. Like, yeah, that's kind of niche. That's kind of weird. That's kind of random. I guess it's not the kind of risky I want. I would be more interested in Apple trying to turn the iPad into more of a 2-in-1, or I don't think it would be good, for the record. Let me be clear on this, but I would love to see Apple do a foldable. I don't think that the foldable would be a great deal or a good buy, but I would just love to see Apple's attempt. I would love to see if, like, you have iOS and iPadOS on one device. Does it get a calculator? You know, like, like, how would they design the aspect ratio? How would they make the software work? I think that having used foldables in the past, Apple would get it better than everybody because they get software better than anybody. And that's what the foldable market, in my opinion, is in desperate need of. The aspect ratios of most foldables I've seen and the way the operating system scales between those aspect ratios is just not very good. And also, Android in general tends to not sell very well in the premium pricing, right? Like Galaxy S phones don't sell that well compared to their mid-range phones. However, Apple completely dominates the premium market. Like, if we're just talking about phone sales that are over $800, it's like 80% iPhone. Like, Apple knows how to sell people on expensive tech better than anybody. So if you are going to sell a foldable for $1,500, $2,000, I bet Apple would get it right. I don't think that would make it better than a regular iPhone. I think that's what most people prefer, is just a glass rectangle that doesn't fold with decent cameras and a okay price. You know, I think that's what most people want. But if Apple did a foldable, they would probably do it better than everyone else, and it would probably sell better than everyone else, even if it was super expensive. Thank you for the super chat. He says, in a video, you said that Apple could remove the telephoto lens and just use digital zoom. I guess Apple going to the Google route. 3 cameras, no need. There's no rumors that they're going to do that, but I'm just saying, right now on the 14 Pro Max, when I reviewed that, it felt like it felt awfully weird that there were two different optical zoom options, and one was 2x and one was 3x. I was like, that telephoto lens is not doing very much right now. Like, the difference in quality between 2x and 3x was very small to me, because you have such a giant 48 megapixel sensor that you're cropping in on to 12, but then the telephoto lens is already 12, so it's like 30% better quality. I was like, yeah, I think that if they were running out of space on the back for camera lenses and stuff, it wouldn't be that crazy to be like, okay, the Ultra gets the periscope lens, but the Pro just gets two lenses. It would be annoying, but I could see them getting away with it. I think the Apple Watch should fold. Okay, hush now. That's enough of that. Touchscreen is novelty was my first thought, but now I'm constantly touching my MacBook screen as my work computer tainted me. Well, I'll bring it on. Wow. So you just got convinced from your work machine that it should be able to do that. Replace the telephoto with periscope. I think that would make more sense than what they're doing right now. Having a 3x telephoto and a 2x on a 48 megapixel sensor that's still 12 megapixel feels redundant to me. It's like that 3x button isn't doing very much. Joshua says that 2x and 3x button thing comes in handy far more than you'd think. Oh, for you more than you'd think. Yeah, you're right, because I don't think it's that useful, but you're claiming it's more. Apple AR glasses with wireless could link to your Mac Pro, could replace big multiplayer. I just don't think that's what people want to do. You can buy some really nice multi-monitor setups for less than $3,000, and you can have more than one person looking at multiple monitors, whereas if you're just sitting at your desk with this big old headset, it's like I can't, see my surroundings as well, and now you got something that's going to make you sweat and push down on your hair and mat your hair. I just don't think people, when they sit down to work at their desk, want to put on this big old thing. Okay, I'm working. I just don't think that's very compelling. Pioski, thank you for the super chat. What if Apple was to go back to making two phones where one is smaller and one is bigger? No 14 and 14 Plus, just a Pro Max with no Pro naming. Wait, what? One is smaller, one is bigger. I mean, their sales didn't do better back then than what they do now. I think you mean like back with the iPhone 6 days. But I do think that they keep struggling to find a 4 iPhone lineup that works. Like, personally, I don't mind the 12 mini and the 13 mini. Like, I would just keep making minis. I got no problem with that. But I guess they weren't selling well enough for Apple to continue making them, right? But now it sounds like the 14 Plus is selling even worse than the mini was, which is like, oh, come on. But I'm not entirely sure if Apple considers that a fail, because I think the reason the 14 Pro and Pro Max are selling so well is because the 14 Plus is not that great a deal. So when people are looking at the regular 14s, they're like, those aren't very interesting. But the Pros, so much better. I'll just get the Pro. I think the 14 Plus is probably helping Apple as a decoy model, but that you'll never be able to measure that success because, you don't have sales numbers to report for it. So I think that probably the magic number is 3. You have one size for the entry level, and then you have 2 sizes for the higher end. That seemed to work pretty well with the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR lineup, because the XR sold really well. It worked fairly well for the iPhone 11 lineup. But personally, I'm like, why do all 4 iPhones need to sell super well? Why can't you just go into it assuming that one is going to sell a little bit worse, and that's okay? Like, people like the mini iPhone. Okay, it doesn't outsell every other iPhone, but it's a cheaper one with probably lower margins anyway. So why do you need that to sell super well? I don't know. I think more differentiation between the lineups would be good, so they're not like cross compared too much. Because right now people look at a 14 Plus and they're like, yeah, it's basically the price of a 14 Pro, and it's worse than the 14 Pro, so I'll just get a Pro. But if they were kind of different markets, like if there was a wider price gap between them, which unfortunately sounds like Apple's probably going to widen the price gap, but not in the way you want. It's like, oh, maybe they'll lower the price of the 14 Plus. No. We're going to raise the price of the Pros. Oh, dang it. I just went OLED on MacBooks. That's been rumored for a long time, and it's still rumored now. But yeah, I think they're just waiting OLED is tricky. It's tricky to get no burn in on a display that big and to keep it really bright. There are OLED laptops out there, but their brightness is not very good compared to mini LED that like we have now. So we're basically, I think, going to keep having mini LED on our MacBook Pros until OLED is uh, reliable enough that it can get really bright and not burn in. Let's see. I wish Pro Camera added the features in an iPhone. Adjusting bokeh would work so much better because it could easily mask out the bokeh already there and all the other features. Dude, David, you don't got to tell me twice. I'm all in favor of Apple making their own Pro Camera and baking in their own silicon, their own software computationally. Imagine if you had the computational performance of a smartphone on a sensor the size of a real camera. You would be able to crank out some beautiful images and videos, and you could build it into the Find My network. You could have biometrics. You could have AirDrop support. Oh my God. So many great features you could build into an Apple made. Like if they just bought Blackmagic or something and then started making hardware with their own tech in it, that would be amazing. Let's see. It would be better if they made the four iPhone lineup every few years instead of every year. I think for manufacturing simplicity, it's easier to just keep the four iPhone lineup going. That's why, by the sound of it, the 15 Plus is not canceled, even though the 14 Plus isn't selling well. They're just gonna try it again because they can't just do one size for 1 year. Just like the 10R was a thing, and then the 11 was a thing, which was reusing the iPhone 10R assembly line, and then the 12 mini was a thing, and the 13 mini was a thing, even though the 12 mini wasn't selling all that great. Now we have the 14 Plus, so that means the 15 Plus is probably going to be a thing, even though the 14 Plus didn't sell that well. I think their theory is that if they price the Pros higher, then maybe the Plus will sell better, which sucks. I hate that they want to take it that route. Um, let's see. I care more about sharpness than brightness. Well, that's not going to change. I mean, we're already at Retina levels of pixel density on our MacBooks, so switching to OLED I don't think will make it look that much sharper. It'll be a higher number on paper. They'll be able to say, now the MacBook has a 4K display, but I don't think you can tell the difference anyway. Um, do you think they may flip-flop between Mini and Plus because people are keeping phones longer, they will keep changing sizes? I'm in favor of that. I don't know how simple that is manufacturing-wise to constantly be switching back and forth. But yeah, I would think that's a decent compromise. Like 1 year you let people get the bigger, cheaper phone, and then the next year you let them get the smaller one, and that way you kind of do both without having a five iPhone lineup because that's just a little too complicated. But um, my 14 Pro gets insanely hot while watching live streams. Anyone else have the issue? Are you on Wi-Fi or cellular? I'm convinced that 5G is just a giant scam. Convinced that is made to drain our batteries faster, so that our battery health deteriorates quicker. So I actually have turned off 5G on my iPhone 13, and I'm just using 4G now. And other than in speed tests, obviously, when I do a speed test, I can tell it's slower. But other than that, I don't notice. Like when I'm browsing the web or texting people or watching YouTube, like I can't tell. I don't. It doesn't feel slower. Okay, it only happens on Wi-Fi. Yeah, it's probably a YouTube issue. Just Google not designing their apps very efficiently. The report seems to imply that OLED will come alongside the touchscreen. Yeah, I did see that. A touchscreen Mac will be terrible for the iPad line, but a touchscreen Mac would be more expensive. That's my point. Like, if they did a touchscreen Mac, it would probably be well north of $2,000 for the smaller size. Maybe I would imagine kind of like just $500 across the board. So like a 14-inch MacBook Pro with a touch display that's OLED is going to be $2,500, and if you want a 16-inch MacBook Pro with a OLED touchscreen, that's going to be $3,000. So it's like, yeah, I might eat into iPad sales, but they'll probably have pretty thick margins on those super expensive ones. Honestly, I feel like OLED on the MacBook won't be that noticeable, unfortunately. It's like mini LED kind of ruins the big transition that you get from LCD to OLED, because mini LED is almost like right smack dab in the middle. It's like it's a bit, you can get a bit brighter than a standard LCD. You get a bit more dynamic range. You get a bit more contrast ratio. You get a bit more colors. It's not quite as good as OLED, but it's definitely better than LCD, which means that if you're switching from mini LED to OLED, it's not a super noticeable difference. It's like, okay, there's less blooming, but most people don't notice the blooming anyway. Um, I wish I could turn off 5G, but ever since 5G was built out in my city, 4G has become terrible. I've noticed that. They straight up downgrade the 4G service to try to get you on the 5G plan. I've done speed tests in the same areas with 4G and 5G, and 4G used to get a certain amount of performance, and now they've throttled it down. Basically, 5G is a big giant scam. Could you explain what 6G could be used for? Because it looks inconvenient since it would drain a whole lot more battery. That's it. It's meant to use up more battery quicker so that you upgrade your phone more frequently. That's probably the most useful feature of 6G. But I was told 5G was supposed to be faster. And in a ton of use cases it's slower. In a lot of situations it's about the same speed as 4G. Maybe like it's definitely not like 10 times faster like they said it was going to be. It's more like when it is faster it's like 50% faster, It's not like huge. OLED would allow for the panel to be quite a bit thinner, so that's something, I guess. Well, yeah, that's assuming they figure out how to get OLED bright enough and not burn in as frequently. So that's we're hoping on a lot of display technologies to align all at the same time. But the bigger debate is um, how would Apple? Why would Apple do it? Like okay, we want OLED on the MacBook, sure. I don't think anyone's going to fight that, but what's the what's changed in Apple's mind? Like, because for years they've said that touchscreen Macs aren't a good idea and they're not as useful. So is Apple going to design a 360-degree MacBook that you can fold around backwards? Is it a dual boot device, or do they tweak macOS to make it more touch friendly? Do they want to bring Apple Pencil support to the MacBook? I would assume so if they do give it a touchscreen. But yeah, I just have a hard time visualizing it knowing Apple. Like, why does Mac get all the love and support, basically? How much does the 2-year free emergency satellite cost? What does it cost Apple? Oh, I don't know. I feel the margin was in the 14 Plus and not the Pros, meaning I think the profit is higher on regular iPhones and not Pros. I don't agree, just because I don't think that there's that much of a higher cost to build a 14 Pro despite the higher price. Um, I mean, I guess I see your point. Like the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus are reusing so many display. 14 Plus is basically using a 12 Pro Max display. They're using the same A15 chip as before. So it is very recyclable. So the margins are pretty good. But I don't think the margins maybe aren't as crucial if Apple doesn't report them. They just kind of report revenue generated. And if more people are buying the Pros, then more revenue overall will be generated. I tell all of my family members to turn off 5G on their phones. Maybe turn it on if you're stuck in a situation where you really need faster internet. But if you can get by with just 4G and that's able to load everything just fine, then I think that's probably very beneficial for your battery. At the end of it, as well as a Twiddle photo and a collab. No, don't tell people to get Malek. Don't get Tailosive Tech Ultra. Tailosive Tech Ultra is a terrible deal. It's a scam, basically. But Tyler Forte got it, so special shout out to Tyler Forte and Riley McGinnis. I don't know why, despite what I said, despite me telling people not to sign up for it, Riley McGinnis and Tyler Forte, they signed up. But they didn't want to collab. They just signed up. I was like, okay, thanks, I guess. But I would do these regardless. Would you rather Apple buy a camera company or build their own camera? In my ideal world, I think it would be better for them to buy an existing camera company. Like Apple has already worked very closely with Blackmagic. If you weren't aware, Blackmagic is the company that makes my camera, and this is a very old camera. They've made much better ones than the one I'm using. I just don't think for my videos I need to be recording at 6K or 8K or whatever. So this camera's fine for my use cases, but they make really good ones. And the main reason I would prefer it if Apple bought a camera company is that they would probably incorporate Apple tech, like the Find My Network and Apple Silicon and Apple software and the computational stuff that we have in our iPhones. They would probably embed that in existing cameras, like the existing lineups. It'd be like the new Pocket Cinema camera supports, Deep Fusion or whatever Apple wants to call it. And that way we could keep using all of our existing tech. Whereas if Apple made their own camera, I'm not convinced they would use the same lens mounts as everybody else. Apple might want to have their own proprietary lens mount, and then you have to buy adapters to get your EF lenses or your Sony F lenses or what have you. So if they bought out an existing camera company, they could reuse and keep parts and lenses accessible for the masses. AirDrop would be huge. Yeah, if I could basically just have a pocket cinema camera with AirDrop, oh, that would be beautiful. 14 Pro display is probably way more expensive. Yeah, it is an LCPO. That's a good point. I take that back. You're right. The margins are probably better on the 14 and 14 Plus. Let's see. Do you think we're getting closer to getting micro LED? It's rumored for the Apple Watch Ultra. I've been reading that micro LED is around the corner for several years now, so I've reached the point of I'll believe it when I see it. I remember talking about micro LED, I think back in 2017, reading reports saying it would be ready by 2020. Now it's 2023 and they're saying it'll be ready by 2025. So I'm like, yeah, you don't know. Don't trust anyone that says they know when micro LED is coming, because it's been pushed back so many times. I have a 14 Plus because the 14 Pro Max was not available. I was coming from an iPhone 11. Yeah, honestly, Elizabeth, bringing up the point about how the margins are probably thicker on the 14 and 14 Plus is probably why Apple's solution is just going to they're probably going to raise the price on the Pros this year and the Ultra. Maybe they'll call it Ultra so they can justify raising the price, because the 14 Pros, I think the big mistake Apple made, which is to our advantage, is just that the 14 Pros were way too good a deal. You know, like 120 hertz, dynamic island, pro camera system, all that for $1,000, at least in the US market. 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max were just cheaper than everyone thought, so everyone went with Pro. And we talked a lot last year about what we thought the price hikes were going to be like, and we were all wrong, and they kept prices. I know it's different overseas, the prices went up, but that's for currency reasons and import fee reasons, and they include the tax in a lot of countries, and they don't include it here, so it's not exact comparison, but we all were kind of prepared for the prices to go up, and they didn't, so I feel like we kind of got lucky last year. This year, we'll probably end up paying the price, and the 15 Pro will start at $1,100, and the 15 Ultra maybe $1,200. Honestly, I think they could push it to $1,250 or $1,300 if they really want to, because the number of people that are going to be willing to drop pretty much anything south of $2,000 on their next phone, because iPhones are so popular now. They're of course Apple's bread and butter, and they're extremely high volume, more so than pretty much any other product in the world. I don't know if there's another product that's produced at the same, or an electronic at least, that's produced at the same volume as an iPhone is. So people live on these things. People use their phones so much. It's consuming so much of our time. There's laws being passed about smartphone addiction because of how useful these things are. I'm using it as we speak, and I'm going to use it when I end the stream. When people are using them this frequently, you can kind of get away with charging a crap ton for them. Like, I just talked to my friend a couple weeks ago that got the 14 Pro, and I was asking him why he got the Pro, and he was like, I use my phone so much, and I don't plan on upgrading that frequently, so I got the 1 terabyte option. I mentioned him a few streams ago, but like, okay, he straight up was comfortable dropping, let me spec that out again. How much is the 1 terabyte? He was comfortable dropping $1,500 on a 6.1 inch iPhone just because it had the storage he wanted. The margins on the 1 terabyte iPhone, I may argue, could be better because of how much more they cost. Swapping out the NANDs on the iPhone, like, okay, it's no longer the 128 gig model, now it's the 512 gig model, now it's the 1 terabyte model. It does not cost them $500 to swap to a 1 terabyte chip. Absolutely not. I think it might actually be sub $100. The price of NANDs in those little chips is really not much, from what I've read. So I'm sure that the profit margins on those higher storage configurations are much better. And the way Apple could get away with it this year with the iPhone 15 lineup is they could easily just drop the 128 gig model and just say, well, we're basically just going to force everyone to get the 256 gig model, which starts at $100 more. So in a way, the price didn't go up. There wasn't a price hike if you buy the higher storage configuration. That could be their way of going about it. Ryan says there's nothing they could add that would make me want to upgrade from the 14 Pro. We all say that, and then they come out with some new wallpaper, and everyone's like, what? I want that, you know. All it takes is one feature that we weren't expecting. I know I thought the 14 Pro was going to be a lot more boring than it ended up being. Um, let's see. Do I think our current iPads are powerful enough to run macOS? Of course. Of course. We have proof. I know for a fact you can run macOS on an M1 chip without any fans. It's called the M1 MacBook Air. The iPad can have all the exact same hardware it needs. It has an M1 or an M2 chip now. And it can connect to a keyboard and a trackpad. It has a display. It has speakers. It has everything the MacBook has that can run macOS. It has a Thunderbolt port. So, of course it can. Absolutely. Let's see. Apple made camera that can be used with continuity camera. Yeah, that too would be awesome. Sorry, the bit rate's kind of all over the place. If Apple increases by 100 but also increases storage to 256, then it technically wouldn't be more expensive for me. I always upgrade to 256. Exactly. That would be their marketing ploy. That would be their, well, it's not that much. What? $1,300 starting price? That's pricey. Is Apple's nuts? I'm going to pay it, though. I don't care. Exactly, Penn. That's pretty much, I think, Apple's logic for it. That's outrageous. Done. Hey, Drew is 22. That's a lovely first name. It's your birthday. Happy birthday to Drew. Congratulations. Thank you for the super chat. You're like, for my birthday, I'm going to give someone else money. That was very kind of you. I wish I could refund it. Is it worth getting an iPad Pro M2 over an M2 Air M... Oh, God. Stick, are you trying to throw a curveball at me? Because I don't recommend the M2 MacBook Air or the M2 iPad Pro. First of all, what are you using it for? Like, if I don't... There's certain things an iPad is good at and other things a MacBook is good at. If you're comfortable with... If you're even considering both, then I would say get a older iPad Pro. Okay, if you think the 2018 iPad Pro for $500 or less is too old and you're worried that it's not going to get software support, then okay, you can at least find an M1 iPad Pro on sale now or an A12Z iPad Pro on sale now for much, much cheaper than the M2 iPad Pro. So I'm going to lean toward whatever's cheaper if you're considering both. But you're not giving me enough information to give you a very firm recommendation. If the iPhone 15 somehow still doesn't end up with USB-C, will you switch to the Pixel like you said? Darius, I never claimed that. I said I was toying around with it, but I never came forward and said officially, yes, if the iPhone 15 has Lightning, then I'm switching to Pixel. I was thinking about it, but then I realized, no, I don't want to switch to the Pixel, even if the iPhone keeps Lightning. So I intentionally never put my foot down and said that. Please don't put words in my mouth and say that I did. Correct me if I'm wrong. Find the video where I said it, but I know because outside of work, when I wasn't streaming and when I wasn't working, I was thinking about it a lot. I'm like, do I want to put my foot down? Do I want to do that? If I did, I would have made a video about it. I don't think I would have just agreed to that on the off chance during a live stream. I think reviewing older tech that's made by Apple will perform better for this channel and be more interesting for me and the viewers than me switching to Android, because I don't think most of my audience cares what I think of Android phones. I know there's some of you that want it, but based on the video's performances when I do, it doesn't seem like people are that interested. They're like, we know you're the Apple guy, so of course you'll just highlight a few of the hardware features, but say, ultimately, I prefer iOS, and then go back to iOS. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's pretty much how it's going to go. Is it $1,300 if you trade in your old phone? Nope, loophole. Yeah, that's Apple's loophole. Well, they're already doing this. I'm looking at the iPhone. I've been working in the EV space for so long. I'm calling it the configurator. That's what it is, right? I'm looking at the iPhone configurator on my iMac Pro right now, and so much of the pricing is listed in the monthly cost. They're not even really talking that much about the unlocked upfront price, which probably it's reasonable for them. I know it looks better marketing-wise, like to just say, like right now it says the 14 Pro is $41.62 a month, and the 14 Pro Max is $45.79 a month. I got to admit, that's a pretty great marketing ploy for them to be like, well, the Pro Max is an extra $4 a month. Most people are going to be like, okay, I can do that. Um, so when people are looking at the monthly cost and people are trading in their old phone or they're getting them discount, most of the people I talked to that got 14 Pros didn't pay the unlocked price. They got some deal, they got some trade-in credit, their carrier convinced them, hey, we'll bring in your old phone, we'll give you this much towards your next one. You know, they do that to keep you from switching because you feel like you got a good deal, and then they make all their money back through the expensive cellular service. But it's probably reasonable to assume that like we're kind of getting obsessed with the unlocked upfront price when that's really not what most people are paying. That's the most like easily comparable across the board. How much did this phone cost? How much did this phone cost? But that's usually not what people are paying. You know, we can't really compare the monthly cost because that's going to be different a lot depending on which carrier you're with or what you're financing or what credit card you're doing, and all that stuff. But there's definitely, from what I can tell, a lot of people paying for their phones monthly. Every day I regret trading in my Mini, but that 120 hertz on the Pro is worth it. I'm missing my Mini too these days, to be honest. What I'm also missing is anytime I pick up an older iPhone that has the rounded chassis, I'm always like, oh, this feels so much better than the squared off edge design. The squared off edge design was cool for a while, but I'm kind of tired of it again. But keep in mind, I know that people are like, oh, you're just going to prefer that and then you'll want to go back again. And I'm like, no, I wasn't the guy asking for the squared off edge design, okay? I know there were some channels back in iPhone 10 days or 10s days that were saying, I really hope Apple brings back the squared off edge design from the iPhone 5S. And I was like, nah, I mean, who cares? I don't really need that to come back. And then the rumors started that the 12 was going to revive it, and then the rumors ended up being correct. That was from Ming-Chi Kuo, I believe. Kuo was very spot on that report. He was way ahead of it, too. He was like 14 months early, I think. It was like the iPhone 11 wasn't out yet, and I believe Kuo was saying that they were going to revive the squared-off chassis in 2020, and he was right. I was kind of impressed by that, but I just find the round-off chassis feels super-duper comfortable. It just feels so much nicer to hold, and I was not advocating for squared off to come back. Once it came back, I was like, yeah, this does look cool. It does look more modern and more futuristic. But my general consensus, I think, if you go back and watch my review of the iPhone 12 Pro, I believe what I said is that the squared off design looks better, but the rounded off design feels better. So what's more important to you? That the iPhone looks cool or that it feels good? I've seen other people claim, no, they think the squared off edge design feels better in the hand. I just couldn't disagree more, but we all have different hands, I guess. Carrier contracts are a scam. You usually ended up paying up more for less. Yeah, I agree. That's why I use Mint Mobile, because I don't think that the major carriers are a good deal. But I know what they do with the hardware. They're trying to constantly like, we'll give you this much trade-in on your old phone. Oh, it's time to upgrade, because they know if they I've talked to people in my personal life that are in this exact situation where they're on a big carrier like Verizon or AT&T, and they found some promo going on because of some sale, and they were like, we'll give you this phone basically for free when you trade in your old one, but because it's on contract with that phone, you get the new iPhone and you feel like, wow, I got a great product, because the carrier didn't actually make that phone. Apple did. Apple put in all this time and energy into a great camera, great display, and you're like, cool, I got a great new phone. But because it's tied to that carrier now and you're paying it off slowly, you can't leave that carrier. So their monthly cost is very, very high. These carrier companies are very profitable, mind you. So when you see them promoting deals like that, like we're going to give you this much off or we're going to let you trade in for that, they're not losing money. They're losing money on the hardware, but they're making way more back off of you paying monthly. So my recommendation is to go with the MVNOs, because they're not doing those kinds of hardware promos. I have never seen Mint Mobile be like, will 14 Pro on us when you trade in your old thing. Maybe they have, but either way, regardless of what promos they offer, the MVNOs offer super duper cheap rates. There's a bunch of good ones like They were recommending them in the previous live stream. What is it? US Cellular, I think, is a good one. Republic Wireless is a good one. Visible is a good one. Although I don't know if I trust Visible because they're still owned by Verizon. So I'm like, there's ties there. But Mint Mobile is what I use. And they have, in my experience, like the cheapest cell phone service you can get. And then to just not buy the latest and greatest iPhone as soon as it comes out, either go certified refurbished or go secondhand. That's where you're going to save the most amount of money. If you just want to have the latest iPhone day one, then yeah, I guess buy the 14 Pro Max. But I still think you're better off going with MVNOs. The Coder Pro, thank you for the super chat. Says my internet is bad, so I can't watch for long. But hi, hi Coder Pro. Sorry, your internet sucks. Appreciate the super chat. Let's see. A dangerous thing about paying monthly with the iPhone upgrade program is if you get a new debit card and forget to update it on the website, you will be paying much fees. Don't ask me how I know that. I see. No, I think it's just a dangerous thing, not only because if you change banks or whatever, or debit cards or interest rates or what have you, even regardless of all that, I think it's dangerous mentally to get into the barrier, to get into the realm of paying for more and more things monthly, because you will spend, they've done studies on this, and that's why Apple's promoting it so much. Consumers will objectively spend more money when they see the smaller number, and they were objectively like good at give me product sooner, even if it costs more. Like most of us, at least Americans, I've heard it's different in Chinese culture or something. I don't know why, but just the way our culture works is like you can get this now for cheap, and people are like, yeah, I'm looking at the configurator, like $45. I have $45, and I'll probably have $45 every month for the next 24 months. So that's not a big stretch. Yeah. So people do that, but just it gets you in the habit of like, well, then yeah, I can finance an Apple Watch Ultra. Yeah, I can finance a MacBook. Yeah, I can finance it. And before you know it, you'll be drowning yourself. It's like death by a million cuts. So, and I think that buying something up front is a healthier way. There's certain products that are just very difficult to buy up front, like houses or cars, but I actually didn't get a loan on my car against what most people were suggesting because I prefer not getting into that mindset of like, well, don't think about the total cost, just think about the monthly cost. And that can get you into a slippery slope of, well, if I'm paying that much per month, I might as well pay this much. And then you spec things a lot higher opposed to just buying things once outright in cash. Houses I feel a little bit differently on because those appreciate in value over time. Whereas a smartphone or typically even a car is not going to appreciate. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, those are liabilities, not assets. Penn says, I like square design on the iPad. Yeah, to me, the squared off design makes sense on the iPad because that's how you dock the Apple Pencil with it. But the iPhone can't make that claim. Don't pay interest if you don't have to. Exactly, yeah. 15 Pro / Ultra is going to be a great middle ground between squared off and rounded. Flat size on the front that makes the bezels appear thinner, then curve it off towards the back so it feels more comfortable. Exactly. I hope that rumor ends up being correct about the 15 design. That would be great. Like $1,000? What? $999. Now we're talking. Yeah, I think a big part why the minis didn't sell that well are the carriers. I wanted to get a 13 mini for my girlfriend, and all of them were telling me to get the regular 13 because it's much better. The carriers are upselling you, I guess. Maybe the carriers are too good at their job. OBS was updated for Apple Silicon since you reviewed the M2 MacBook Air. Maybe you can review the M1 MacBook Air as an old cheap Apple Tech review. Well, I kind of just did it. I mean, I don't think much has changed about it. I updated OBS once they optimized it for Apple Silicon, and I didn't notice much changed. I think that the emulation Rosetta version of OBS was still pretty good. But yeah, I'm using the Apple Silicon version of OBS right now, and I compared the two. It didn't change. It didn't improve my battery life. It didn't make my CPU run cooler. So it's cool that it runs natively, but I don't think it helped all that much. It's good that it should run natively, but I didn't notice. Houses don't come with extra add-ons. Well, yeah, I mean, they do. It's just not in the same way. Houses always, oh, well, you can redo this. Oh, you can expand it. You can redo the countertop. You can add solar. Houses have arguably way more add-ons, but yeah, they're not the same thing. You don't have a house configurator, usually. You just kind of look around at what's available. Drew says, when the iPad Pros get the next redesign, do you think it'll be the new same design as the 15 lineup? I don't think so. I think they need to keep them at a certain thickness for the Apple Pencil and a certain amount of squared off. I don't think that rounded back is going to matter too much for iPads because iPads are always being used with these covers. They're like the take rate on iPhone cases is one thing, but iPad accessory take rate is like 95+% of people are using them with a smart folio or a keyboard case or something that latches onto the back. So the squared off edge design doesn't really hurt as much. Um, let's see. Let's see. Zach Jewett says the absolute only way I recommend financing as if you literally no money and need a phone ASAP, but if that's the case, you have Verizon. I may know where all of your money went. Yeah, I would say there's a bigger problem. If you literally have no money, I don't think that your best solution is to finance a phone. Definitely not an iPhone. If you're low on money, um, I would recommend buying like the oldest possible iPhone you can. Like I know it's not ideal, but I know people in my personal life that still use the iPhone 6. You can find an iPhone 6 on Marketplace for like $50 rather than say, I need a phone right now. Let me sign up for this monthly membership of $60 a month to get the 14 Pro. It's like, no, yeah, no, that wouldn't happen. I do have the 12.9-inch iPad, yes. Apple Pay Later is just the latest AirPower. It's probably never coming. I don't understand why that's taken so long. Um, Here we go. Another Verizon representative ripping into Verizon. Zach Jewett says, we make $0 on the phones. Those promos are the reason we no longer have contracts. If you can, I always recommend buying outright because eventually the bill will only go up. You're just like reinforcing so many of my beliefs about Verizon every time you talk about them in the chat. It's hilarious. Um, Bloomberg just broke that T-Mobile is considering acquiring Mint. Oh no, please don't. DM me the article. Oh boy. I hope Bloomberg's wrong on that one. Because if T-Mobile, where is this? I gotta find it. If T-Mobile buys Mint Mobile, then basically I can guarantee all my prices are going up. So would they keep prices the same? I don't know. Hopefully, if prices stay the same, I won't mind. But yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. Maybe Apple will cave and put macOS on iPad. I'm hopeful. I mean, I don't have much hope, but I still believe that's what they should do. That would be the quickest solution to justify iPad Pro hardware. Right now, it's very hard to justify it, but if it had macOS on it, it would be like, perfect. Okay, cool. It's like a two-in-one device. When do you think Apple will do it and appease to the EU laws regarding messaging? I don't know of a way they can do a loophole there. I think they could enable um, iMessage on Android and side loading and stuff. They could do that because it's software. It's very easy to restrict it to certain jurisdictions. So they might just have that only for the EU, but they don't do it anywhere else. But I haven't seen any hypothetical on how they can bypass that. I mean, they could fight it, but it probably won't work. The EU is going to win. So they're probably just going to do it, my guess, later this year or early 2024. And it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. But when do I think the next Apple event will happen? Decent chance based on previous years that we'll have a spring event near end of March. That sounds logical. What I love about my OtterBox Folio case is that it protects the back and the sides unlike the Apple cases for iPad Pro. Yeah, I know a lot of people still buying OtterBoxes. Why would T-Mobile want Mint? They already have Metro. Maybe they're losing too many people from Metro to Mint, but shouldn't antitrust get concerned with the merger between T-Mobile and Sprint now if T-Mobile wants to buy Mint? Wouldn't that be kind of close to monopolistic? I don't know. It's not monopolistic because AT&T and Verizon are already a thing, but it's like I'm kind of in favor of these MVNOs so that we can have more than just three carriers. It's a good idea. Yeah, I don't like Verizon either, but I don't know. Maybe Mint's doing well, so that's a good enough reason to buy them out. Ryan Reynolds bought or heavily invested. I don't think he's the sole owner, but I would prefer if Deadpool kept Mint around. I don't speak for Verizon. I just speak the truth. I got to add this in here just so I can make sure I continue to get a paycheck. It'd be hilarious. I mean, it wouldn't be hilarious. I'd feel very sorry for you, Zach, but don't. don't take this the wrong way, but it would be kind of hilarious if you got fired based on comments you made during one of my live streams. Like, obviously, that's not funny. I don't want you to lose your job. But just as a simple one-liner, if you just told that in a story, it would be kind of funny. Like, a guy was talking about how much Verizon sucks in one of the live streams, and like a higher-end Verizon executive was watching my live stream and was like, I don't like what that guy said. I'm going to fire him. It would be kind of funny. That's all I'm saying. Remember when the big four carriers became the big three carriers? Did you hear about the fake chat GBT apps showing up on the App Store? I thought the iOS App Store was supposed to be super secure. Well, it's not flawless, but yeah, there's still things to get through. But yeah, it's probably more secure than Android. Verizon job, no need. Yeah, I'm just not obsessed with the chat GBT things. I feel like people are going nuts about it. It reminds me of oh, what was it? It's like that Genie website. I forget what it's called, but you can like ask you can answer a couple of questions and it knows the person or the thing that you're thinking of. It's kind of like those 21 question balls, but just put on the internet. We used to play with those as a kid. It's just like when they figure out a way to make an AI have very intelligent responses, everyone just loses their minds and says this is going to take away all our jobs. And I'm like, well, maybe the easy to replace jobs, but yeah, it's like, what jobs were just typing up essays? Like, how common of a job is that? Like, maybe it can replace. I think I saw a report about how, well, this will definitely make it harder for teachers and professors to convince students that they need to write an essay if you can plug in a prompt and a computer can prompt out the essay. But I kind of thought essays were mostly pointless anyway. And maybe in that case, it's like, okay, well, then you can make a professor that can replace, you can make an AI that can replace a professor too. And I'm like, all right, well, you just got to get a bit more creative, but I don't think it's going to like change the work thing all that much. Maybe I'm wrong, but personally, I have a difficult time seeing the mistakes that ChatGPT makes. I'm not convinced that that's going to replace a bunch of the labor force. It might be a helpful tool for certain jobs, which I'm grateful it's that, but I got nothing. Like, that can't do anything for me, is all I'm trying to say. When is the next Apple event? It feels like the last one was so long ago. Uh-oh. What's going on? Why is the super chat broken? Okay. I watched there's like duplicate super chats showing up on my yeah, okay, I think YouTube is broken for some reason, but thank you, the Coder Pro, for the super chat. Says I use Aldi Mobile. Can you solve solve Rubik's Cube? No, I suck at Rubik's Cube. I'm not good at puzzles or quizzes. You know, I like barely passed high school essentially. That's why I'm a YouTuber. Let's see, when is the next Apple event? Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Probably like a Tuesday in late March or something. Ben, thank you for the super chat. He says, today out of boredom, I watched other tech channels and reminded me how annoying sponsored ads are. So thanks again for your 100% ad free. You're welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate you guys for being so supportive. The fact that you're watching or super chatting or signed up for Tailosive Tech Plus, all of those things are able to keep the channel free of sponsorships, which I am super grateful for. So thank you all. As long as you're watching, I will keep making them. Jacob says, I had GBT write me a 4-page essay for school, and I got an 85% on it. It was a completed essay, too. See, that's exactly what I thought the use case was, but that's not a job. That's just a class. It's like, yes, this is a very helpful tool for cheating in class, but that's more of an education problem than a labor force problem. ChatGPT is actually very useful at helping me fix many bugs faster than before when coding. But can it replace software engineers' positions? That's what I doubt. I think it's... I'm not denying that it's useful. I just doubt that it will replace workforces. That's all. Zach says, I agree. I think it would be funny, but I'd be on a job hunt for a minute now, so I'd get out of... Anyway, I'd love for it to be that way. If they fire you, don't you get like more benefits for that versus if you quit? I don't know how it works. It's probably not good for your next job, but it's good in the short term. I don't know. Please don't remind me. Turn it in. E uploads. Thank you so much for joining Tailosive Tech Plus. Unreal Cousins also. Thank you for your support. Says writing an essay while listening to this. I used to write essays via dictation because I always thought that I could speak much better than I could write. That's why I don't script my videos. And my friend got really annoyed with me on that because he was working on the essay and then I was working on the essay, and I could speak like a 4-paragraph essay within like 10 minutes. And he was like, "What? It's like that's cheating. Like you should have to write it out and everything. It takes longer, and you got to formulate." And I'm like, "Nah, I could just think of some big words and speak it, and then new paragraph." ChatGPT would be great if it ran on Apple neural engines. The neural engine in the M2 chip can do 15.8 trillion operations per second. I thought it's working on some back server end where it probably doesn't make that big a difference. Hey, Indoctoral sold his Galaxy Fold 4 for $1,000. Wow. Only 50% lost resale value. Impressive. Good for you. Okay. Is the rumor that Apple is making their own search engine that doesn't use Google for 2023 or 2024? I've been following that one for years, so I don't have much faith in it. I remember that report in 2020 saying it might happen in 2021. So it's the same opinion of the mixed reality headset. It's been delayed so many times that I can't trust new reports about it. So I'm just going to assume it's not a thing until I'm proven wrong. Do you have any role models inside the tech community? Ooh. Oh yeah. I mean, Marquez probably is my go-to response. I feel like he just kind of invented what most people view as a tech channel. Like, you get products and you review them and you try to make it look nice. I feel like Marquez kind of invented tech channels. I know he probably wasn't the first. There were other tech channels that existed, but the modern day tech channel as we envision it today was kind of first done by him. I would say he's my biggest role model. But I don't know if I necessarily like the term role model because it's not like I just want to become like Marquez. It's like he inspired me probably more so than any other tech channel, but I don't think my channel is like Marquez's, and I'm not trying to replicate Marquez. Like I'm not trying to do the same things he does, and I'm not prioritizing the same things he does, and I'm not posting like he does. So it's like inspirational, but I'm not trying to like he's the model that I want to be like. It's like I want to find my own voice and my own style and all that. Thank you, the Coder Pro, for the super chat. He just said he liked trains. Appreciate it. My friend who owns a business fired a few employees who wrote blogs because ChatGPT writes them faster and better. That's hilarious. They must have not been very good because I've seen some of the articles that ChatGPT has wrote, and they're not very impressive, or they usually leave in a lot of flaws or problems. So if you fired journalists for that purpose, but honestly, like I kind of don't blame people for not reading articles in depth because a lot of journalists I think are paid by the word, and I can tell when I look up certain articles. I'm not against reading inspiration, not aspiration. I don't know the difference between the two, but yeah, one of those is more accurate. Yeah, I think there's a lot of articles I'll read where I'm like, oh, that's an interesting story when I read the headline, and then I open it up and I'm like, you've got nothing to say. Like, you're just kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. Now, I'm guilty of this as well. A lot of people watch my videos and they're like, you're just repeating yourself over and over again. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's just, that's how my brain works. Sometimes in repetition, I can explore a different subject, or sometimes I repeat a point to drive it home, but that's not usually what I get with articles. It's like, yeah, you're just repeating a bunch of information that everyone already knows. Like, at least when you do a video, you can kind of add jokes in with it, and you can attach your own opinion to it, and there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of little details you get when you can speak it out and kind of phrase things a different way, opposed to like, I don't think I would have a very successful website if I just dictated what I said and put it into article form. I've actually had companies reach out to me and offer to do that. They're like, hey, we can do a Tailosive Tech website, and we can just create a article version of your videos and put it on a blog. And I'm like, I don't think it would be the same. I don't think it translates well, like the comedy aspects, and that's why I like doing the skits. And um, there's just a lot more said with, when you're actually speaking it versus just typing it. Um, Marquez's rivalry with Linus Tech Tips is funny. What was funniest was when Linus sponsored an MQHD video. I thought that was kind of funny. Drew says, I really enjoy your company and content. Thank you, Drew. I appreciate the support. Joshua, thank you for the super chat. Here's $5. Wow, that was random. What was your favorite Mac model made before Apple Silicon was introduced to the Mac, and how does it compare to your favorite M Mac? I think I gotta say the iMac Pro. I didn't love the cheese grater Mac Pro. I thought that was priced horribly, and the specs weren't even that great on the entry level model, and it was like a completely, totally niche um, market to go after the $50,000 computer world. And I thought that wasn't necessary for Apple to get into. I was like, that industry is using supercomputers and custom servers and everything. Like, they don't need a dedicated Mac that sits under a desk that's 50 grand. I'm like, why do you want to bother with that market? Um, but I'm looking at it. The iMac Pro, which I'm using right now, not to live stream, but I don't do like video editing on it, but when you're running multiple YouTube channels, YouTube doesn't make it easy to switch between the channels while you're in the middle of things. So it's helpful to have a second computer or just a different browser that works too. But the iMac Pro has a big screen. So when I'm working on videos or if I'm reading the chat while I'm live streaming for the Tailosive Tech Plus members, it's nice to have a big screen to display lots of information. So I'll watch videos or I'll read the chat or I'll pull up websites, or if I'm uploading something on the MacBook and I just need to change a thumbnail or update text, I can do it on the iMac. So it's a great little secondary Mac, but I love the unveil. I loved the design when it came out, and I love how it aged. I thought for the money, it was a good deal. Like $5,000 for the entry model. That entry model was pretty freaking great. It came with a terabyte of storage by default. I still don't think there's any Mac that's done that still to this day. The Mac Pro didn't do that. The Mac Studio doesn't do that. It came with 32 gigs of RAM and a terabyte by default and a 5K display, great sound system, and the performance for the time was quite good. In fact, even when the M1 chip came out, it didn't outperform my iMac Pro. So I had to wait for the M1 Pro or M1 Max chip to drop before I could say that, yes, Apple Silicon is now faster than my Intel Mac. I thought the M1 might kill it. When I got the M1 MacBook Air, I was like, maybe this is going to outperform it, and it didn't. And even the 24-inch iMac with, even if the M1 chip has fans and it's not binned or anything, it still couldn't outperform my iMac Pro. So I bought it day one, and I feel like the fact that I'm still using it today in 2023, and I bought it in 2017, I got a lot of use out of that thing. So, and I still am getting use out of it. So I'm grateful I have it. My favorite Mac before Apple Silicon, yeah, I'm pretty confident. I don't know if that counts because there is technically like a T2 chip or something in the iMac Pro. There is a little bit of Apple Silicon in it, but I was super hyped about it when they announced it. I thought it was the coolest thing. I still would argue the iMac Pro has the best I/O selection of any Mac to this day. Maybe the Mac Studio is a bit better now, but that just came out. But that just came out last year. The iMac Pro in 2017, 4 Thunderbolt ports, 4 USB 8 ports for your old stuff, headphone jack, SD card slot, and 10 gigabit Ethernet. Like, try to find any Mac that could beat that, like, until the Mac Studio came out. Mac Studio, okay, it's got an SD card slot, it's got 6 Thunderbolt ports, but still, like, the I/O and the fact that it was an all-in-one, the fact that it was space gray, I still admire it. Like, I put it to sleep at the end of the day. When I walk in the office, it's just from so many angles. I know it's a little dated because it's got the chin and the bezels are pretty thick, but it just, from the side profile, it looks so thin. Like, it's just such a beautiful design they came up with. And I still don't really I personally think the iMac Pro is the best looking iMac of all time, because you guys know how I feel about the 24-inch iMac. And I'm like, that iMac Pro just looks so good from so many angles, and it was super capable. And it was the first Mac with a 1080p webcam. So I think I made a video about it a while back, but I think I considered it like the best stopgap of all time, because basically the iMac Pro is meant to hold over the Pros until the Mac Pro was ready, and the Mac Pro, in my opinion, was like a huge disappointment because of the pricing and the design, and just, it wasn't, it just, it didn't even have an SD card slot. But the iMac Pro did, and it was cheaper, and it came with great speakers, great display for the time. So yeah, I'm very happy I bought the iMac Pro, and honestly, I'm kind of grateful I kept it for all the. I came close to selling it several times, but I never got an offer that was very competitive. Um, so that's my answer. Sorry I spent so long on that one. Man, I've been streaming for a while. I better wrap this up. If I give you a chat GPT article information on a topic you want it to write about, it produces very impressive results. It's impressive that it's a robot, but I wouldn't say that. My point is, if it's better than a human, then that human was probably not that good. It's like, because there's typos and mistakes and factual things that ChatGPT still gets wrong. So if you have a website that can literally just pump out articles from an AI, then cool. But in my opinion, if you were writing articles that were that little in substance or that little in detail, that are that easily replicated, then your job was at risk of being lost anyway. um, let's see. You're the only YouTube channel I watch every video. Oh, thank you, Puroski. That's kind of you. My iPad Pro has better single core performance than the $50,000 Mac. Yeah, but the $50,000 Mac had a 28 cores. Your iPad has 6 high performance cores, I think. Let's see. I'm a believer of the M series iMac Pro. I can't wait. Yeah, I really hope that happens. But I get the feeling it'll still have a chin, which, I don't know. I honestly think if you're gonna have a chin, it should have the Apple logo. I think that's a better look. I can visualize in my head what a 24-inch iMac would look like with space gray edges and a black bezel. And I'm like, I don't really like that look either. I prefer the iMac Pro look unless you can do the iPad on a stick. It's like, if you're going to redesign the iMac, just have one size bezel all the way around. Basically, just make the Pro Display XDR. That design, but it just has a computer in it. That's the only iMac that would look better than the iMac Pro to me. Everything else is just weird. I think there's some rumors about a new iMac Pro coming out, but they've gone awfully quiet, so I get the feeling it's not going to happen. Let's see. Gonna be truthful, I first watched Tailosive when I was like 17 because I thought Drew was Thank you. I don't know why you thought that, but now you're a total Apple sheep. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. 4 high performance cores, 4 high efficiency cores. Yeah, imagine if you had 28 high performance cores. It doesn't really matter if those cores are somewhat slow. That's a lot of cores. But yeah, the Mac Studio is outperforming the Mac Pro as well. Oh, and then you asked my favorite M Mac. Yeah, of course, the one I'm using, the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Like, just the insane amount of performance you can get out of an M1 Max chip. And when I tested the M1 Ultra, it didn't scale all that well. It was like, okay, it's 2 Maxes together, but that didn't really unlock that much more speed to me. M1 Ultra was kind of a letdown, but M1 Max was not. Just an insane amount of like improvement when it came to how quickly I could export videos, and it kind of rethought to me, like, it completely reimagined how long a battery life can be in a laptop. If you're not doing intensive work on it, you can get the 16-inch MacBook Pro to just last like days and days and weeks, which I've tested on my own trips. Like, just an absurdly long battery life because of how efficient it is. The fact that it unlocked use cases for me. Like, something I couldn't do on my iMac Pro was live stream my video editing process, which I now do frequently, all the time. For the Tailosive Tech Plus members, I can live stream, capture my display, capture an external video source, and be color correcting ProRes 4K at 60 footage, and live streaming all of that simultaneously. And M1 Max keeps up. The biggest problem is T-Mobile and their unreliable speeds with home internet. But the performance on the chip, it can take it all, and the fans don't even rev up. It runs silently. It's amazing what that chip is capable of, and this is also, in my opinion, the best display Apple makes. Like, the only problem with the MacBook Pro display is its size. You know, it would be really cool if we could get all of these specs on a big screen, but they just can't do it yet. It's just not possible. But the fact that it's a ProMotion display and it's mini LED and it's 16 inches, so it's bigger than any iPad display you can get. It's just a gorgeous canvas to edit on, and great battery life, great performance. There was so little to complain about when I reviewed the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and then a year went by, so I did my 1 year review, and I was like, yeah, I can't really say much bad about it other than the optimized battery charging, software problems, macOS being lackluster with controls over the battery. But I can't really complain all that too much about that, because even with battery degradation, the battery on this thing is going to be amazing. Even if the battery health was at 80%, it would still last longer than pretty much every PC laptop in existence. So I can't even really complain about that. And I got Al Dente working the past few weeks. It's been fine. I'm sitting at 80% and pulling all of the power from the wall, not from the battery. Let's see. I like the studio display look over the iMac any day of the week. No chin at all. Thank you, David. Yes, absolutely. That's what an iMac should look like, for sure. I know it doesn't have a display and stuff, but similar kind of target. Oh, what are you saying? The replacement for the iMac Pro, pretty much the Mac Studio. I would argue that's more of a stopgap for the Mac Pro, but yes, you're right. It does overlap with the iMac Pro market a bit. They just figured, based on the replies and probably criticism that the iMac Pro got. I remember when the iMac Pro came out, and I think I was watching. I usually don't watch him, but I remember watching Linus Tech Tips do a video on it, or someone did that normally builds PCs. I can't remember. It's been a while. But their argument was, for the money, this is a good buy, but the parts that go into the iMac Pro are traditionally not the parts you would buy for your own PC. Like, they were choosing this type of graphics card and this type of CPU, and very few people would pick those, or the specialized RAM they gave the iMac Pro. They were like, yeah, those are good, but there's these other options that are cheaper, but they don't necessarily perform exactly the same way, but pretty close. So it was like, if you really wanted the 5K display and this speaker setup and those port selection for the money, the iMac Pro is actually not a bad deal. But there was likely a lot of people complaining about it that Apple noticed, of like, well, they don't want an exact 5K display, and they don't want that type of RAM exactly, or they don't want that kind of GPU. So they were like, well, if the Pro market is wanting to use their own choices and, choose their own setups and monitors and what have you, then it's unlike Apple, but it does help the professional a lot more to just be like, just give me the computer and I'll build out the rest of it myself. I'll provide my own accessories and my own components. And that way you can get the high performance for really cheap and then just build it out how you like. And Apple was probably right in assuming that most people that need a Mac for the studio would rather use their own stuff and customize it the way they want. So you're right, but I still think that there's a portion of the market that would prefer having an all-in-one device that is also a Pro. M1 Pro MacBook 14 inches, a pretty solid Mac. Absolutely. Wonderful MacBook. Let's see. Do you think that Apple should make a series of cheap products, so a bit like the 5C polycarbonate barter? I think they already do that. They just wouldn't. They just don't call them a different name. I don't think the polycarbonate body would save that much money compared to glass and aluminum. Maybe a little bit, but I don't think Apple's cheap products tend to not sell all that well. I think Apple's better at the premium stuff, unless it's iPads. Did they ever actually release the new components for the modular Mac Pro? Not really. That's why I laugh at the cheese grater Mac Pros, because it was kind of just a big joke. They were like, hey, it's modular. And everyone I talked to said, I prefer modular because it means I can upgrade it over time. But then the year after they launched the Mac Pro, they said, actually, we're switching away from x86 and it's all ARM now. So I was like, well, that kind of defeats the point of it being modular, doesn't it? Like, I thought modularity was for upgradability. But now you're saying that that architecture is dated. It was kind of like a big troll, in my opinion. It's like, at the last second, at the very end of x86, we're going to drop the most expensive Mac of all time. And then a year goes by. Actually, that's all dated now. Here's the Mac Studio. It's a fraction of the price, and it outperforms the Mac Pro. It's like, so, yeah, it kind of, in my opinion, that's why, personally, I never cared that much about upgradability or modularity in Macs. I'm like, my preference is to just buy a little bit more Mac than you think you need, and then use that until you run it into the ground, rather than let me replace the GPU. Oh, let me replace the RAM. Let me replace the SSD. It's like, before you know it, you've bought a whole new Mac, but you're stuck with the older hardware of the stuff you couldn't replace. So, M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro is a very solid. Buying the second. Yeah, they're kind of the same thing. There's just different sizes. Yes, the new MacBook Pro from 2021. Those are great buys. 14 inch is a great deal. 16 inch is great battery life, a lot of performance. High power mode. We 16-inch MacBook Pros get the high performance mode. On my desktop PC, I've noticed that when you upgrade one thing, you have to upgrade another, and then you have to upgrade something else to get the full performance. Not worth it personally. That's what I experienced. I used to have a custom-built PC, and I upgraded components in it, and over time I was like, wait a minute. But okay, you replace one thing, but now that old thing is causing more problems. It's like, that's why I bought a Tesla. It's like, I don't like working on cars either. It's like, I'm constantly going to be working on replacing the weakest parts instead of just getting a whole new thing, which will have all great new parts if it's a good one. And that's how I've treated Apple products, and it's worked out pretty well for me. Um, but oh my gosh, it's after 4. Jeez, I've been live for a while, so I better wrap this up now. Personally, I don't think we're going to get touchscreen MacBooks, but I'll be fascinated if I'm wrong. But thank you all for your very generous super chats today, and the channel members signing up. You guys are awfully kind. You've given me a dream job that I'm super duper grateful for, and I appreciate all of you. So hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Stay tuned for more videos. Take care. Bye-bye.